So the people who take this buyout are often the individuals who are the most talented, often the people who have the most job prospects post Microsoft. They're the ones who take it, get a one-time payment, and go out and get another job. Welcome to the Wellable Weekly Podcast, where we talk about key topics and trends at the intersection of well-being, technology, and HR. I'm Nick, here with my good friend Geoff. A lot of stuff happening, Geoff, across a lot of big companies and a lot of dollars being moved. And why it's important to us in our conversation is often those dollars being moved and those budgets being balanced impact people and employees that work for these companies. And so I think if I was trying to summarize the overall theme of what we're going to talk about, because it's a bunch of different articles across two Wellable Weeklies, because we had a guest podcast last week, is really a function of employers trying to save costs so they can transfer some of those funds, presumably, to AI spend. And that AI spend could be infrastructure spend, like buying servers and data centers and all that type of stuff. It could be buying or renting compute if you don't, operate your own, or it could just be paying for tokens, right? And so there's tons of articles and stories about companies, paying someone $300,000, like a software engineer, and expecting them to use another $300,000 in tokens to kind of execute at a higher level with AI. So effectively, now hiring one engineer could be the cost of hiring two. And how do you balance that in the context of a, huge number of employees in the case of the companies we're about to talk about? So how are companies doing this? I think there's a couple of options. One is like the one I think that gets the biggest headlines. It's like the layoffs. So you have, we've talked about a ton of these. Block is laying off people, Meta is laying off people, Amazon's doing cuts, Oracle's doing cuts, Dell is doing cuts. Across the spectrum, people are cutting folks. The biggest ones are the ones that have the biggest spend, no surprise. And these are the ones that are trying to operate their own data centers, like the Metas, the Amazons, of the world.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the two companies that were recognized for making these big changes to benefits, right? Zoom being one, and Deloitte being another, rolling back benefits across kind of key areas like parental leave, PTO, right? Things that are really critical to a lot of employees. When I saw those two company names, the thing that came to mind for me was the kind of nature of those two organizations, and how in the case of Zoom, obviously kind of a pandemic darling, and really invested a lot over the early 2020s to ramp up hiring and infrastructure to account for the fact that we were all thrust into this kind of hybrid or remote world. And then Deloitte, in a different industry, but really a good example of how this AI transformation is radically changing how people work. As a former consultant, right, I was at EY for a number of years, and I remember my first job, right, as a junior associate, a lot of creating pitch decks and working in Excel, largely things that I would expect like Claude or Chat could automate in maybe like 80% of the role. So I just think, and even if you looked at the press release from Deloitte, they're modernizing talent architecture to provide a more tailored experience reflective of our professionals. So it's not just one tweak of the benefits suite. It is completely rethinking how they structure organizations to combine human capital and, as you point out, more technology capital with the use of tokens and AI power.
Exactly, and to give some perspective for this, these benefits are getting cut kind of across the board, but Zoom and Deloitte are famously in the news, and because both of them are focusing around maternity and paternity benefits and parental leave and things like that. So for some context, Zoom, if you are the birthing parent, they're reducing the paid leave from, it said 22 to 24. So maybe depending on where you are, you get one of the two, down to 18 weeks. So it's like a material drop, right? In terms of the number of weeks you get for leave. And if you're a non-birthing parent, you're getting it reduced from 16 down to 10. Again, a very, very material drop. And if you think about, as you noted, Zoom was like the tech darling during COVID. During that time, they couldn't hire quick enough. They're trying to bring on so many folks. To do that, they were giving, in addition to like really, nice compensation packages, really robust benefits. And one of those is parental leave. So the fact that they're dropping it is indicative of a lot of things. I think one of it, it's flexing the job market in general. Like employers now have all the power, it seems, where 2 to 3 years ago, it was so lopsided on the employee. Now it seems to be lopsided on the employer. Ideally, I think you kind of get to an equilibrium where, the right candidates have some leverage, but the employer has choices and options as well. But that doesn't seem to be the case right now. Deloitte, a little bit different. They're actually cutting their parental leave based on roles. So apparently they deliver benefits that are role specific, like administrative services, information technology, finance. They have a set of benefits where the consultants may be a little bit different, but they're cutting that down. They're also axing, some annual PTO benefits. They're making changes to their pension plan. They also, a really big or kind of popular benefit that emerged with pretty significant growth during COVID was IVF benefits for parents who are struggling to get pregnant and have a baby. And so they're cutting or making changes to that as well. So pretty substantial changes. And I'm just trying to put myself in their shoes. Like, what are they, what are they doing? Are they just trying to flex their muscle because they can? Are they dropping the benefits because they can? Or is this a way to potentially have some people opt out? And if you're an expecting mother and you're thinking, I really need 20 some plus weeks to be able to like operate the way I want to in terms of serving as that capacity as a parent, you may just choose to leave that job. And maybe that's what Deloitte's trying to do. Like to your point, when you're at a consulting firm in your earlier career, when I was in banking, I think about what I did as an analyst. And I was like, man, a lot of this could at least be done sufficiently well with AI. And at the very least, just a little bit quicker with AI. So if that's all AI did was improve your speed, in theory, unless like that business grows, you just need less analysts to deliver the same amount of output.
Right. I mean, the benefits you pointed out that are being adjusted or cut by Zoom and Deloitte, I mean, they're not coming for the ping pong tables or the free snacks, right? They are coming for, family oriented benefits that, as you would expect, when cut or when adjusted, sparks this, outcry or outrage from, employees who maybe have been there for a while, were counting on these as part of their family planning process. So again, companies would have to expect some sort of response to that. Certainly publicly, I know there's a lot of commentary out there, but it could just be that because of the way the labor market is right now, and again, more pendulum swinging towards the employer, that they feel these type of adjustments can be made to put these policies in place and have a range of leave that they feel like is more appropriate or more balanced between favorable to the organization and to the employee. And sure, there's going to be some outcry against it, but with a tight market and maybe not too many favorable destinations for folks to go to, in some way they're able to do that, and employees who are committed to the company and their careers there will stay and manage it. And again, those who are it's a deal breaker, there may be some natural attrition that those companies are prepared for and expecting.
This reminds me, for those of you who don't know, we at Wellable, we run this annual broker health plan summit. We fly a small group of people who are industry leaders to Mexico for a multi-day kind of thought leadership focus group type session. And so we're covering all sorts of topics of the day. And so last year, it's every year, it's October. Last year, I won't name names, but someone who is the head of well-being for a very, very large national health plan made a comment about why health fairs were becoming so popular in that given moment. I think it was an observation one of the national brokers made a comment about, and it just sparked a conversation like, where did this popularity of health fairs, where's it coming from? And this person made what I think was the best rationale, right, that I could think of, which was in that moment, and keep in mind, this is October of last year, and so I feel like we're only heading more in that direction, not less, was companies were reducing their benefits, right? They were adjusting their health plan, maybe increasing their deductible, reducing some of the benefits you may get in the health plan, et cetera. And that's a hard pill to swallow. So they launch a health fair. It's fun. It's exciting. People are getting tchotchkes, et cetera. The goal of a health fair is to communicate benefits and benefit changes. So it's a way for you to do that in a very fun and engaging atmosphere, in a way to cloud the fact that people are getting a reduction in benefits. And so when I heard that from her, it instantly clicked. I go, that's it. That's why health fairs are booming. And the reality is this reduction in benefits, not just big ones like parental leave, et cetera, have been happening for months, and it seems to be picking up pace. And from my perspective, I think part of it's cost management, reallocating capital from humans into capital into AI. And I think that's part of the rationale. But I think also part of it's like, as you try to support that thesis, you can get there by reducing costs in terms of benefits, or you can reduce benefits in the sense that it becomes a mechanism to remove people, where Meta and Block want to do pretty significant layoffs in terms of just the number or percentage of people. You have to do that through layoffs. But if you're just trying to reduce your workforce a little bit, one way to do this, and you've heard this before, is do a return to office mandate. And if all of a sudden you bump your return to office to 5 days a week, you're going to lose some folks. And that may be a path to getting that headcount reduction without having to go through a layoff or severance and all those type of things. It reminds me a little bit of what Microsoft's doing. So they're taking a little bit of a different tack, but I think it's the same goal. It's like they need to transfer capital into humans, into, in their case, AI infrastructure for data compute and things like that. And so Microsoft announces first ever, this is a 40, 50-year-old company at this point, first ever voluntary employee buyout. The goal is for 7% of the US workforce, so pretty significant, right? Not as high as the layoffs from Meta and Block and others, but effectively, in short, it's for senior director titles or below, whose years of employment and their age add up to 70. So if you're 50 years old, you're a senior director, and you've worked at Microsoft for 20 years, 50 years old, 20 years of work experience, you hit the title cutoff, you're kind of eligible, right, to take this kind of voluntary employee buyout. They're also making some changes to stock and cash compensation and the type, just general processes. But I find this really interesting because I remember this story coming up with, about buyouts and early retirement during the whole Doge crisis. Early last year and during kind of the early part of the new administration. And a lot of people are saying, like, using early retirement as a way to reduce the workforce isn't a good idea, because if you are that senior director and you're 50 years old and you've been at Microsoft for 20 years, the person, at 50, maybe you have enough money to retire. But even if you do, maybe you just don't want to retire, right? Like, there's a huge portion of that in people who meet that profile who are not going to retire. So the people who take this buyout are often the individuals who are the most talented, often the people who have the most job prospects post Microsoft. They're the ones who take it, get a one-time payment, and go out and get another job. So yes, you do reduce your workforce, which is like the stated goal, but you want to do it in a way that you get to keep the people you want rather than having them choose. And I think, not to say one's better or worse, but in layoffs, you get to choose who you keep and who you don't, right? In a reduction in benefits, if part of the goal is to reduce the workforce, you don't really control who leaves or not. Similar in a voluntary buyout, you run a situation where you lose control, and a lot of studies and data points suggest the best people leave in that scenario, which can be what Microsoft wants.
100%, right? And it's probably why at the same time when they made this announcement, they also indicated that they're going to change how they approach performance-related bonuses and stock. So effectively moving away from it being directly tied to a bonus, that being stock awards, but giving managers more flexibility to recognize high performers with higher stock allotments. And so hopefully that helps partially address the situation that you described, where maybe a high performer who was kind of on the fence on whether to take that buyout or stay for a bit longer would be more monetarily incentivized to stay with the company. So with that, I think it's probably a good time to wrap up today's pod. Really appreciate the conversation, Nick, and as always, for those who are listening, you can tune in to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts for our weekly episode, and be sure to subscribe to Wellable Weekly to get all of our other insights there. Thank you.